Can they communicate with the agents? Do they have the respect of the agents? And how are they on the phone? Because text messaging only goes so far. And I see texting is just, it doesn't build that human connection. And I think we get trapped in this thing of texting because it's easy and quick. And I think we lost patience of living in the moment too.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Ronin Leadership Podcast. We did another one last week, and it's been a while since we had a guest, and so I'm really excited about this week's guest. What I talk about in a few minutes. Usually, I'll do my usual shameless plug. I want to thank all of you for buying the books that I've got out there now. The last one, Full Circle, actually made number one on Amazon in several categories in about 7 countries a couple of weeks ago. So thank you all for that. Continue to support the podcast. Hit the like button, the subscribe button. Tell your friends, family, enemies. Tell everybody about the podcast. And so hopefully we'll continue to grow the listenership. So enough with that, because I want to get on to the meat of this. So there's a gentleman that is our guest today, Mark Ledlow. It's interesting with Mark. I consider him a friend, though we haven't really met in person. But Mark was gracious enough to have me on his podcast, and so I'm returning the favor. But more than that, Mark is a true patriot, Marine Corps veteran, entrepreneur. Started his own companies and enterprises. Has his own podcast, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and we'll have a link to his podcast and a link to all things Mark Ledlow, on our website and on the podcast. So, Mark, thanks for taking time out of your busy day. Welcome to the Ronin Leadership Podcast.
Hey, thanks, Mike, for having me. What a treat. I mean, I've been following you for I don't know how many years. I can remember supporting something in Microsoft with one of my clients, and then working with Chuck Randolph at the time. And
Right.
and I heard your name, like, holy crap, Mike Howard's no joke. He's a big deal. I was like, I was one of your fanboys at the time.
Yeah, I remember my boss at one point. We were at I don't know, we were at a Seahawks Cowboys game, or he was, and he told me he was sitting next to the head of security at the time for the Cowboys, and he mentioned my name, and he said, "Oh yeah, Mike Howard, he was a celebrity CSO," but that was a long time ago now. I'm retired now. I'm enjoying my retirement.
Smart, moved to Vegas to make more money on your retirement. That's a smart move on your end.
So, Mark, for those in the audience who don't know you, they probably heard your name, but don't know you. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself, your background, and where you are right now in the industry?
My background's been a wild journey. If you would have told me that I'd be doing what I'm doing now, I would say you're nuts. You must be high and spoken some sort of error that I haven't not found yet. But I'd have to give credit where credit's due. The Marine Corps, the Marine Corps, those yellow footsteps off the bus, flying from my first flight with Portland to San Diego. And the guy next to me was a Special Forces Army Ranger, and he was a CEO of some company. He goes, "This is your first flight, isn't it?" I'm like, yeah. And I was literally grabbing the side of the seat. I think Coach United something, and I was like, "Oh crap!" In my first flight, I'm like, now I go back to those days, and the Marine Corps created that foundation of discipline, tenacity, perseverance. And I had no idea the doors that opened that I'd gone through. And pure discipline, get through the adversity of growth and personal growth. And, Marine Corps, the law enforcement, worked in youth corrections in Oregon Youth Authority. I was one of the first guys to open up a facility, and I was going to school full time at RCC, then going to Southern Oregon University, and I was working like 3 different things, plus going to college and the Marine Corps Reserves all at the same time. I was just like,
wow,
I was just always busy, and I think what the Marine Corps did for me mentally was I wanted to always challenge my mind and personally grow. And if I wasn't stimulated or challenged, I felt like life was dead for me. And
right.
so Oregon Youth Authority, and then going to college, getting my degree. And that took me 10 years. I didn't get my degree until I was 31. But of course, I was using the
Wow.
GI Bill and the reserve duties and all that stuff, going up to Eugene, Oregon to do those drills. And it took forever, but we got it done. And then I think I got a little tired of the military, the government, and corrections. And so I got crazy and went corporate America for a little while, and then did some business sales for key banks, telecommunications for Sprint, did all that. And I think that built my sales mindset a little bit to understand relationships and all that. And then 2008, the market crashed. Then I changed everything. And then I'm like, everybody told me in Oregon that I was crazy for moving to Southern California. So I did, I made that move, got on Craigslist, started looking for jobs, and got on the biggest detail in Southern California, thanks to Robert Dodge. Shout out to Robert. And he interviewed me, and I was on an Indian reservation detail for like a year under I think it was the Pinkerton umbrella back then. And that was Craigslist, meeting people, and then just networking like crazy. We didn't have all this stuff we have now with LinkedIn and social media. We didn't have any of that. And I just had to, do it the old way, do a good job on your every day you worked, just show up. And now here we are, running, like you said, 3 companies. And I think I've grown into the, like you said, entrepreneur mindset, understanding the value of time versus time for dollars, and getting around a lot of business owners myself in different other industries and challenge myself mentally on increasing my mental capacity. And that's kind of where my journey has gone, and just the challenge of creating something and trying to make it happen is I think more satisfying now than it ever has been, because as we get older, the body just doesn't respond like it used to.
Amen to that. Yeah.
So that's what I'm finding is my joy now is in, giving those veterans work, or the former law enforcement folks work in the executive protection industry. And that's where I really enjoy, going out in the field, meeting agents, seeing what they're going through, just talking to them one-on-one. Go to a job site, say how they're doing. Yeah. Holy cow! I didn't think the owner would come out to San Francisco today to visit me, but that empowers them. That makes them feel good, and I think the industry has lost that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I cut my teeth in EP, when I was still with the government. I was on the director of CI's detail, and obviously then running EP for Microsoft. And you're right. I mean, I give you credit for a couple things. Number one, reaching out to veterans and law enforcement, and giving them a chance, an opportunity in the field. But actually, the field is right until proven wrong, right? That's what Colin Powell always said. And you're out there to make sure that you're seeing what's happening in the field, which is that was the old management by walking around, but it's amazing how many people don't do that, right?
They don't.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And I learned that from the Marine Corps. Take care of your troops in the field. NCO, Staff Sergeant below, you're out there in the field with them and seeing what they're going through. You didn't know that they were separated from their better half. You didn't know their kid went to the hospital for a mental breakdown. How do you know that? You got to call these guys on the phone and talk to them, or show up and have a one-on-one with them for 20 minutes, just to see how their day is going. And just, I think corporate America has become, they're all about focused about the almighty dollar and the profitability. They don't care about that agent on the ground. And that's how I want to be different as a company. The brand is a team, not Mark Ledlow. It's the team.
Yeah, no, I amen to that. I agree. It's it's amazing those simple things are not done in corporate America. I mean, I've seen bosses at Microsoft where they'll just email a direct report who's right across from them, as opposed to get up and talk. Right? I mean, just stupid stuff like that.
Laziness.
And laziness. Hey, I wanted to pack something a little bit. So when you joined the Corps, how old were you?
I went in at 23 or 24. I was a little older. They called me grandpa when I went in, because everybody was 18 right out of high school. And I did firefighting right before that. I did 4 years of firefighting. in Oregon before that. My dad's like, one day, he's like, Mark, are you gonna be a wildland firefighter the rest of your life, or are you gonna do something with your life? My dad was a Vietnam vet. I'm like, what do you mean by that? Well, if you ever want to have a girlfriend or get married, you may want to have some job stability. I don't think firefighting seasonally is going to be the thing for you.
Right.
I'm like, oh, but when you're young, you don't know. You just all you know is your present day, what you're doing. I'm like, oh, okay. And dad being a Vietnam vet, he ran the house like a Navy drill instructor. I didn't get to my first movie until I was out of high school, and didn't go to my first prom or anything because he's strict. But his discipline and tenacity from being a vet himself instilled in me just that work ethic. But yeah,
Sure.
24 years old when I won the Marine Corps.
So as you've spent obviously a fair amount of time with the Corps, and I've worked with a lot of people in the Corps. It's obviously a great service. As you mentioned discipline several times, and the whole leadership thing that you established, especially as an NCO, because my dad was an NCO in the Army, so they're the backbone of the military. Can you give an example of any mentors or people that you along the way that you helped shape who you are today? You don't have to be military, but I know that you spent a lot of time there.
Yeah, I would say as far as mentorship goes, I learned that through different organizations that I was a part of that I got invited to. They, oh, you're a Marine, you're aggressive, you're motivated. And so I think that naturally attracts people that are already motivated. And, I got invited to different leadership conferences like John Maxwell conferences and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I get around other business people that were not even in the security industry, and get around those, CEOs to business owners that run multi-million-dollar businesses. They just think differently than the job people. And we need job people to fill a job, but the mindset is night and day different from a person working a job. Totally different mentality.
Yeah.
And that's where I got mentorship was outside of the security industry. I didn't seek mentorship from people. Well, I take that back. Mentorship would come from I was on a job detail with Mike Trott, and we did a thing in Beverly Hills, and I would watch him manage the whole operation in Beverly Hills. I think they fired over 100 different agents.
Is that right? Wow.
It was a clean house. It was a mess. They got there, and their client can't say who they are, but he writes about it in his book. And I was in that book. I experienced it because I was in the book kind of per se, because all the majority of the agents were females. And I just watched him, how he handled stress, how he treated the agents, and he buffered himself from, I noticed he created like a buffer from the principal for the day-to-day operation, and he treated us like he was the coach. We're the football, the athletes on the field. And that's kind of the buffer he created. I just watched him. He was always calm. But inside, I'm sure he was boiling, cooking eggs and making a big breakfast with all that stress. But Mike Trout was a big one for me. I would say Dan Clark International. I ran into him with Juan Gonzalez on a project in California they did together. And Dan Clark, he took the industry just seriously. The most serious guy I ever met in the industry. So I had Michael Trott here, then Dan Clark here, Juan Gonzalez here. I'm like, holy crap. They just have a different level of professionalism I've never seen before. And I've been working in LA market circuit for, I don't know, 5 years before I met them. Like, whoa, I need to raise my level of execution and everything. And then Robert Dodge has been a key player. We talk at least probably once a month.
Okay.
And just, hey, what's the pulse going on in the industry? What's going on out there? So I'm starting to talk, CW out there once in a while. And I learned to take their strengths, and I've learned from their mentorship is where my weaknesses are running a business. I got to find people that are really strong in my weaknesses,
right,
and let them excel. Back off. Don't be a control freak, but let people excel in Google Sheets and accounting and numbers. I really suck at that stuff. That's just not my strength.
Me too.
And people are good at social media. They know how to run that stuff. I have a team that does most of my stuff for me. And it just, as you know, it takes too much time.
It does. Yeah. You need those, especially those young millennial types, that can know how to do all that kind of stuff. But yeah, those are great names. I mean, those names just bring back memories, and I think I'm going to see Mike Trout very soon, actually. So sometime this month. But yeah, those are great examples. And you're right about using mentors to help raise yourself up and to where you are now, right? And now you're mentoring other people, and so everything goes full circle, right?
It goes full circle, exactly. I mean, Robert Dodge is the one that pushed me to start my own shop. I mean, you
Okay,
need to start your own shop. Quit relying on everybody else. I'm like, and once you become a business owner, and what I learned too is whoever controls the money, whoever gets the checks, have that contract with a client, you control the money. And
right.
instead of having a business partner where you have to wait and have it split up and all that, it just gets convoluted. And you're
Mhm.
better off being a single owner of a company versus partnerships. There's nothing wrong with partnerships, but it gets messy, especially in
Yeah,
leadership. It just gets really messy. And what I learned too is, for me, forgiveness.
yeah.
Because if you have issues of forgiveness with people, it will come in your personality when you're running a business. Because those
Hmm.
issues you have in the past with whoever, if you don't have them dealt with, they become really major mental obstacles in your growth as your company too. And you have
Right.
ego. You got to put ego to the door. You got to put your pride aside, and you got to get the mission executed. And if you don't listen to your team, what I found out for myself is I spend 90% of my time listening to my team,
Hmm.
to their feedback. Yeah, I may not like it, and sometimes I go back to my Marine Corps mentality, and I'm like, okay, just shut your mouth and listen. And then you have to filter that information to make an executive decision and get the mission done. And sometimes you have to take a loss with your partner, which I've done, because maybe the client didn't like this agent that you're supporting them with, and you have to take a loss.
Hmm.
And that's just how business goes. And yeah, it's just been, um, I guess, baptism by fire and making mistakes and getting back up. Like, Michael Jordan, how many times did he lose it, not make it to the NBA finals because he was trying to figure out who he was?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I've always admired folks like you, entrepreneurs, because I've always had, to a large extent, an enterprise around me. Police, agency, Microsoft. So you listen to Robert Dodge, who's a great guy, and you decide to go off on your own. So, like, walk people through the steps you took to build your business, right? I think that'd be really interesting for people because people say, "I want to be an entrepreneur," but how do you do it? Well,
Are you?
what do you do, right? Yeah.
Well, first thing I said is, have I lost my mind? Do I really want this kind of stress? It's very stressful. However, you have to have a system in place. Process and systems are so critical. If you don't have that in place, you don't have the number of people in place to keep your numbers straight. You don't
Mhm.
have Google Sheets in place to keep your books. But that was later on. For me, it was like, I got a call from some guys out of California. They're getting in the marijuana business in Oregon, and they
Mhm.
wanted me to, get my license so I can support them. I'm like, all right, I have a motivation. And talk to Robert about, yeah, you need to get your own shop, then I'll send you some business. I'm like, oh, okay. And so I go get my license mainly to support a marijuana thing. It would be $1 million contract in Grants Pass. So I
Okay.
went and did it, and then talked to some folks and said, yeah, you want a retainer if you never worked with these folks before. I'm like, okay. So I got mentorship before I, made decisions. And I talked to these guys that had a marijuana grow and said, okay, before I do business with you guys, I got my license and all that insurance. I need a retainer, 100% up front for the first 30 days. Oh, we don't do
Okay.
retainers. And the smartest thing I did was back off.
Good. Yeah.
I'm like, all right, no retainer, no business. Sorry. You have to draw the line in the sand. And what I also learned in running a business, you have to have a backbone.
Mhm.
And the nice mark that everybody knew from Southern Oregon, they called me the Southern Oregon redneck when I got to Southern California because my first job, I showed up in jeans and a flannel shirt because that's what we wore in Oregon. Wasn't
Right.
really the business entirety where in Southern California. I didn't know what I didn't know. I even wore a baseball cap because it's just what we wore. And
Right.
go, 15 years later, now I'm having to, create this backbone of no, say no. That's not good business. And
Mhm.
knowing when good business is good and knowing when business is bad. and knowing how to mitigate those risks for your business itself, because you mitigate risk with clients too. So you got to do the same thing for profit and loss, for making profit as a company. And that's the biggest thing I've learned is you have to have margins in business. If you don't have any good margins in business, those dollars are going down the toilet really fast.
Yeah. So and as you started building your team, this is a big one, right? Everything depends, you said it, on the team, right? The team is the company. What do you look for in top talent? Yeah, I mean, obviously you need the EP skills or whatever skills you're looking for, because I see behind you kind of lists all the different, verticals that your company does, EP being a big one. But besides the kinetic skills, the tactical skills, what do you look for in top talent when you decide to recruit?
For the agents, you mean, or for in leadership?
Both. Just say
Okay.
both.
For agents nowadays in Oregon, California, I am so 100% soft skills, especially the tech market in the Bay Area. We support a lot of that. Nobody cares about how many times you got into the gun range. In fact, most corporations have an anti-gun policy.
Right.
You better know how to talk to that agent and know how to set up the car. You better have gone to a driving school to know how to drive, because what I'm finding out there is a lot of people know, oh, I'm a driver. No, you're not, because we have a client, can't name names, NDAs and all that. We support them a lot in the Bay Area. We've gone through a dozen drivers who thought they were drivers and retired law enforcement folks that did not cut the team. They didn't make it. They just have bad attitudes, grumpy, negative. I hear very negative. That agent was very negative. Really? That guy? There's a lot of negativity out there, so they're bringing in the personal life into the business life too, probably. But I hear that too. But what I look for in agents are positive mental attitude, like an athlete, on your team. Positive mental attitude. Are they going to show up to work on time? What I'm seeing too with our agents as well. We had one of the biggest details in the Bay Area for about 4 months with a certain bank. I'll leave it at that. And what we found is a lot of people just didn't show up to work. They don't even check. They don't even check their own schedule on Google Sheets. I'm like, really? But it was funny. Southern California, we didn't have any problem, but Northern California, they just didn't check their schedules. I'm like, what the heck? If you had a full-time day job, you get fired over this. But they don't seem to care. So I don't know if this is after pandemic or what, but the mindset of the workforce after the pandemic has kind of shifted a little bit. I'm like, I see that probably across the board. And then there's an old saying.
It's not just, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
And I see that, there's a saying used in Southern California, oh, I had an accident. That means they can't make it to work. It's just an excuse. I'm like, but there's a lot of excuse-itis folks out there that make excuses in life. And then now they're making excuses in the profession. Just excuses. And there's just
do you find this across the board with age range, or is it most, what are you seeing here?
Well, I talked to my best friend from high school. He's a multi-million-dollar real estate developer in Salem, Oregon. And he was, dude, it's across all ages. It doesn't matter anymore. I'm like, wow. So I'm seeing it on my end. Are you seeing it in your industry, in construction and real estate development? Yeah, it's horrible. People, they spend all night gaming and smoking pot, and they show up to work drunk. That's the norm in our workforce. But I'd say the security industry, there's a certain more standard. You got to be, come up to work. I'd say out of 100%, you have, that 10% you have to get rid of. So we clean our roster by at least 12 agents. Like, too much drama. And if you if your personal life is kind of out of whack, you might want to get that controlled before you start, applying for big roles, because you're going to be getting vetted, And so as far as agents go, it's the cream always rises to the top. If you're going to be a Michael Jordan, there's Michael Jordans out there. The thing I've learned with agents are the agents that are great are always busy. They're always in demand. You can never book them because they're always busy, which is good.
Right.
But you have to pay them more because they understand their value in the industry. And I see that. And I also understand the value in my leadership, understanding their value, what they do behind the scenes. And I for leadership, they got to have people skills.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people want a human connection too. You can't not buy loyalty without that human connection. And I think with COVID and all that, we lost that human connection, that emotional connection.
Yeah.
And with loyalty, it comes with trust. You have to earn that trust with those agents. And people want to make sure that you're going to get paid. And you got to get them paid. And that's the biggest struggle with running a business is cash flow. That's the biggest struggle you run into is cash flow. And man, it's a stressor. And when you have companies that pay you when they say they're going to pay you, oh my God, it makes you breathe at night, sleep well. But they go, oh, sorry, we can't pay you. We didn't get paid yet. I'm like, oh crap! All right, I got $500,000 floating out there. What am I going to do now?
Right. Yeah. You get. Yeah. Wow. That's interesting.
So cash flow that will make or break a company within a year. The cash flow.
Yeah.
And we've been fortunate. We just hit it. As a company, we hit a record. What we did last year, we already hit this year.
Wow. Congratulations.
Within 3 years. But what people don't realize, I've been in this business for 15 plus years. And I've been building my network for 15 plus years, going to conferences like, you have like ASIS and all that, and Close Protection Conference that Chuck Randolph heads up and does well with the board over there. But it's been 15 years of grinding up and down they used to call me Mark the Trunk Monkey. I'd be up and down San Francisco, LA, working details all the time. And now that I'm in my 50s, I'm like, holy cow, do I want to do that anymore? It's like, that's hard. But there's some guys like, I know some agents that run companies are in their 50s, 60s, still running hard out there. I'm like, wow, much respect. But as far as my leadership team, I look for, can they communicate with the agents? Do they have the respect of the agents? And how are they on the phone? Because text messaging only goes so far. And I see texting is just, it doesn't build that human connection. And I think we get trapped in this thing of texting because it's easy and quick. And I think we lost patience of living in the moment too. We have all these distractions on our phone, and it's hard for people to live in the moment.
Yeah, that's very, very true. I mean, I find myself torn at times too. The moment. That goes to the heart of stoicism too. That's all part of stoicism, right?
Absolutely.
Living in the moment and enjoying the moment, or enjoying the people that you're talking to, the communications piece you talk about. So yeah, I just wanted to break that down because you're spot on with the way you approach leadership, the way you approach the vetting, team members, agents, and things like that.
Get out of their way too. Get out of your team. What I learned too is get out of your leadership's way. If they're doing a job for you, don't interfere. If they're representing you, as long as they have your best interest in mind, stay out of their way. Because one thing with control freaks, they self-sabotage those roles. And I learned that in the Marine Corps, delegation, and get things done. And if you step back and let them do what they're great at, and just sit back and give them the power to do it and just leave them alone for a little while, you'll be amazed as an owner of a company what your team will do for you if you take care of them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that is just the leadership principle that it amazes me again how many people don't get it. Like, oh, I'm losing control. No, you're actually getting more control if you have the right people executing for you. And then you can worry about strategic things instead of being nitnoid and micromanaging the folks below you. I mean, I don't understand how people don't get it, but I'm glad you were able to describe that. Yeah.
When I see myself, if I'm butting heads with my team, my leadership, I have to look at myself in the mirror like, Mark, are you holding on to your ego to prove something? You already have the company.
Right.
You have nothing to prove. You own it. Let them do what they're great at. Let them function in their genius. That's what you got them in that role, because they're really good at, like, we had a direct client and Mark Beason said, you know what? I love staffing. I'm like, I hate it with a passion. Because I remember 3 years ago, we had a direct client in the Bay Area, and I only had 5 people on my WhatsApp thread. That was it. Now we have 125. And he just blew that up because he's really good at networking. He's better than I am at it. He gets on that phone and he has conversations. And he's like, we call him Eddie Haskell. And he just talks to everybody. He's got that flamboyant personality. Everybody likes him. And then, of course, you have Mark Beason. And then you have Michelle, who is, oh my God, she's like the genius Google Sheet wizard. And she does, I mean, I have Ron call me and said, oh yeah, she helped me with my invoice. I'm like, oh really? And she's just phenomenal at what they do, invoicing and all that. You have to have someone to do your invoicing, A&Rs and all that to keep the money coming in. And yeah. I was stuck doing that myself. I'm like, then I have a bookkeeper who's former CFO of Goodwill Industries, Tom Ware, and he's a retired veteran, but man, he just, poof. I was just like, how do these people do it? But that's what they're good at. And that's what you have to have as owner of a company to make your company rise up.
Yep. You top talent. You pick the right people. It takes time, though.
It takes time. You just got to be patient. And then, of course, you have personality conflicts that come in. Well, I don't like that person because they said that. And then you have to filter, are they executing the mission? Are they getting things done? Okay. Well, we have personality conflicts. You have personality conflicts wherever you go. Yeah, it's just part of running a business.
Yeah, it's part of being a leader is you dealing with the people stuff, right? I mean, that's what you get paid for, you know?
Yep. They go, hey, well, you know, that person does this great and that person does that great. You know, it's just, what are you to do? And then, but what I've learned too is with dealing with people in leadership, you have to show grace. People will make mistakes on their watch, but if they grow from that and learn from it, move on, that is the victory. That is the win. And sometimes business is not good business, and sometimes you have to turn it down, turn it away, because if it puts your client at risk or makes him look bad, is it worth taking to begin with anyway? Sometimes you need to turn it down, turn it away. Like, I think we'll pass. Because maybe you get a job, maybe it's 50 agents, but the profit's really not there. And like, and you wait for something bigger to come along that could be more profitable. And then all of a sudden you turn that other one down, then all of a sudden you get a huge project that's even more beneficial for the team. And so I've learned too, you have to know when to save your team's energy. Because if their bandwidth is already tapped out and you give them something else to do, and there's no money in it, then you're wasting your team's time. So being a leader, you got to know when to save your energy's time for that bigger project that's going to be more beneficial. Right. And that was a big learning curve for me, is knowing when to say no.
Yeah, especially if business is good and you got, you know, you got another potential client. There's a breaking point. You're right. It's for your team.
The team breakthrough. And then listen to your team said, we had a project come across our desk and I was on the road, and my team, Mark and Michelle, looked at the numbers and it's just not worth it, Mark. It's just not worth it. I'm like, okay. They firmly believe in their heart that project we got a call for was not worth it. And then I kid you not, I think 4 days later, we got dropped on our lap a 3-week detail for 25 agents that we staffed in another state. And that took all their time. But it brought in a massive amount of revenue.
Wow. Yeah, so timing is everything.
Timing is everything. And so listen to your team. And when they tell you something is probably not a good move, maybe you should listen to them, because maybe they're telling you something that was going to save the company morale too. Because morale and culture is a huge part of your team as well. What kind of culture do you have in place?
Right. So so you have also a training function, right?
Right.
As part of your portfolio. So tell the audience a little bit about that.
Well, because of the podcast, it's been crazy. The stuff, as you know, Mike, you get offered all kinds of business ventures too, running the podcast. And so I partnered with Ronin Training with Frank Mir, who's a UFC fighter, 2-time heavyweight champion, as everybody knows. And Ron Owens is a good friend of his. And Ron Owens actually wanted to introduce me to Frank Mir. So we got that going on. That's training with Frank Mir, doing some UFC combative stuff, self-defense stuff. And we have the online presence there. And ironically, John Schumann reached out to me and goes, hey, we need to do an online training portal too. I'm like, okay. And John Schumann's retired Secret Service. So he's got some huge street creds. And so I spent about 2 days with him last month in Orange County, and we launched the Ledlow Schumann Training Academy. So we felt that it was an online portal, which allows folks globally to get on and get access to the stuff he knows about being a retired Secret Service agent. And we know the economy is kind of getting weird right now, and a lot of people are watching their dollars. So we figured, hey, for a couple $100, you get in the mind of John Schumann and find out what he knows. And it's like, I think there's about probably 10 hours of content on there, and they just go online, pay for the transaction, and you just learn from our experiences. John Schumann gets like several hours of content on his background as a Secret Service agent for several presidents and VPs and being on Air Force One. And he just goes into the basics of what does it take to break into the executive protection industry. So that's the other business venture that I have as well.
Yeah. So you're that's kind of cool. You've got your training. There's also probably a good feeder system for you for potential talent. Eventually. You've got all these balls in the air. You and I talked before we went live on the podcast about just a lot of things that you're doing. So what does Mark Ledlow do to handle stress? Because you're in a stressful profession. You're a business owner. You're dealing with clients. Clients' lives are at stake. And yeah, obviously the team's taking care of it, but you're the person in charge. So what do you do to de-stress? How do you handle stress?
I don't think about it. Stress to me is make sure I have enough money in the bank to pay the people.
Right.
But de-stress, before I got on the podcast, I went on a 40-minute walk. Just walk. No phone, nothing in my ear. Just clearing my head. I usually take about, when I'm back in Oregon, I usually do about 4 to 5 days of walking a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go to the gym. There's a saltwater hot tub at Club Northwest I usually go to, and just soaking the muscles and just working the mind. For me, you have to separate from the matrix, as they say, disconnect. And for me, going to a movie, hanging out with friends, spending time with friends, and then going to the gym. Before COVID, I used to work out 4 to 5 days a week in the gym. Okay. And then I used to be not a gym rat, but I just maintained the body. But now, and then getting a little older, I just do a lot of cardio. And for me, I love watching movies. So that's a big de-stressor for me, watching movies and just mentally checking out. I think I went to a service one time, and the pastor talked about how the Jews in Israel, and they actually take the seventh day off, and they check out. They don't have any impulse at all, and their life expectancy is actually longer than any other country in the world. Why?
Interesting.
Because they check out that seventh day. And so I'm like, that's interesting. They have that longer life expectancy because they actually give themselves rest. And I think we as a culture, we work harder than probably any other culture in the world. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's just been my perspective on the American culture. And I think we just work ourselves to the bone because we are, keeping up the Joneses, and we're trying to, get a retirement, get a house, whatever. But for me, I've really, as I get older, my dad passed away from cancer. And I'm like, I used to jump on jets and fly to this conference and that mixture and all that. And this year, I'm like, okay, I asked myself, do I really need to? Do I really have to? What's the return on investment if I go?
Right.
If the answer is 0, and then I ask myself, when's the last time, if I go to that conference, when's the last time that person called me on the phone and check in and see how I'm doing? Never. Why are you giving those folks your time? Why? What's the point? And so now I have like 3 or 4 questions I ask myself before I get on a plane. And like, what is your time really worth? And so, I was on the road for 5 weeks, for example. I had some fun in Southern California, but I ended up spending about 5 days up in Roseville with my sister and my little 4-year-old niece. I spent 5 days at the pool with her, doing little swim lessons, teaching her how to swim. And just checked off the matrix, didn't check my phone for 4 days, just totally mentally checked out. And it was the most refreshing thing I could have done. And, serve other people, get around people and serve. I think that's been my new my new stress reliever too. But I would say that attending church. I usually attend church functions when I can. Get a spiritual. We all have a soul. The human spirit has a soul, and yet you're going to fill that soul with something. Whether it's alcohol, addiction. I know the vets out there struggle with addictions right now. Vets have the highest suicide rate. Why? Because that soul is empty and they got to fill it with something.
Yeah.
And so that's why suicide is so big with the veteran military community. And so we have a spirit. That soul needs to be filled with something. So yeah, like for me, decompressing Sunday, I'm usually just totally checked out if I can, but running a business sometimes 7 days a week. That what I've learned too is when it's slow out there, don't fight it, embrace it, and just live in the moment. And don't worry about things you can't control. And
See, I love that. I love that. Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, yeah, everything you said is just spot on because I struggle with myself sometimes. I'm retired, but I got like I've got a lot of stuff going on. It's like they really need to be doing this. They really need to be doing that, or just like you said, just step back and what's the ROI if I go to this thing as opposed to hanging out with my wife, my dog, or just checking out, I love the way you're able to do that because a lot of people can't, in our industry, they can't do that.
And I think they're using the alpha personality like they have to be there, do everything. And that was Mark Ledlow 6 years ago before my dad died. And it gave me a whole new set of eyeballs, a perspective on how to treat life, how to treat people, how to treat people with dignity and respect. And just you don't have to do everything. And what was hard for me to accept is you don't have to be all things for everybody. You don't have to. Why? What do you get out of it?
Right.
And so it's been probably a 5-year personal growth journey for me since my dad passed away.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people on these podcasts, but you're really the first one that's articulated very eloquently to keep your sanity and what's important priorities, and sometimes it takes a death, unfortunately, or some other traumatic incident that kind of jars you and say, hey, life is more than this, life is here, life is, around you. And it's good to take pause and perspective because you're not guaranteed tomorrow.
You're not.
Right. And so if you're running and gunning and you're missing out on all the beautiful things in life that are in front of you every day, you plop dead the next day, then okay,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it made me slow. I've really slowed down after I got COVID twice. I'm like, whoa, COVID kicked my butt for 3 months last summer. I was down for most of the last summer with COVID and bronchitis, and I'm like, and I was gone half the year last year, just moving and grooving and doing my thing. And this year, I'm like, just slow down. What do you have to be in a hurry for?
Yeah,
and it's just it's given me, I think, more peace of mind. I had been more reflective on why I do what I do, living on purpose, being on purpose. And I say, well, if I can't, why am I putting so much emotional stress on something I can't control? And I think alpha personalities out there, we want to control our environment naturally, and if we can't, we just freak out. Does it have to be done today? Probably not. Can't wait till tomorrow. And one thing too, I've noticed for myself is when I had chaos enter my world, I've learned to step back. And we have reaction time. We have the first reaction is anger, and so something big happens in life. I allow myself now to go through 24 hours of going through these emotions, and then make a decision with that after 24 hours is over. Make a decision on what I got to do. Because your first response is never the right response.
Yeah, you got that right.
And so I've learned that in the last probably a year is just don't make decisions based on how you feel, especially in business. Give it a while, give it a day or so. Because more than likely your whole mindset's going to change, and how you look at that's going to change. But you got to get your emotions and your anger out of it. And running a business, you have to be in your mental bandwidth, because we only have
Yeah.
certain creative bandwidth in a day. And if you're functioning at 100% all the time, you're gonna short circuit out.
Yeah, I like that. I was listening to a podcast the other day with Jocko Willing, right?
Mhm.
And Jocko talked about just exactly what you're saying. But when he was on the teams, he was a newbie, and they're going in doing CQB, and team leader wasn't making a decision. They had the observers here, and Jocko was wrestling. Should we do this? Should we do this? And he said he learned to, as you said, in his mind, he took a step back. And then as a newbie decided he called the ball on something, but he waited. He didn't, they were already stacked up ready to do whatever. And he thought that was the wrong way, right? So he said, stay left, go right. And it worked. And the observer said, hey, good kid. But it was a lesson that you just talked about where he's then learned as he went up the ranks and as SEAL, especially when he became commander, just take, like you said, take that step backwards. And while chaos is all around, you're able to observe and then be able to make a decision, the right decision. So that was a great, that's a great lesson.
And time is your best friend when you're at a critical decision.
Mhm.
Because if you let time work itself out, maybe you have a situation with an individual, and I can't go into too much detail, but I have a friend in Southern California who's going through a business breakup, and what I told him was, hey, let time work itself out. And he was trying to figure out what to do. He didn't know if he had to go through litigation or whatever. He said, let time be your best friend. You don't have to give an answer today. You don't have to give an answer tomorrow. Let time be. And people are so want to make a decision now. It's got to be done now. It doesn't have to be done now.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't. I want to shift just quickly before we finish the podcast. So I really want to get people really tied into your podcast, right? How did that come about? How did you come up with the name for the podcast? I'm always interested in
It was funny. My good friend Barbara Kirk, she's like a sister to me in LA, and her brother-in-law Chris Decker and I were meeting. She set up a meeting. It was in the middle of COVID. Everything was shut down. Nothing was going on. Not even security work was going on. Sat down and goes, so what are you gonna do? I have no idea. I didn't even have a business then. I had
that.
nothing. And he goes, have you thought about starting a podcast? I'm like, no, I don't even listen to podcasts. What are they? I'm like, I remember salty, Marine Corps vet, I'm like, podcast, what a waste of time. And do you know who Joe Rogan is? Like, I heard of him.
Yeah.
And so he goes, well, have you thought about starting a podcast focused on the exec protection industry, or maybe not just the exec protection, but maybe have, different people in the industry in your network and have a conversation with them. Why would I do that? Was my answer. Why would anybody listen to me? I'm just
Right.
Mark Ledlow, the Marine Corps veteran. And that's how I looked at that whole project. He goes, well, think about it. If you spend 2 to 3 years running a podcast, creating these relationships through podcasting, you realize what kind of world you can open up? I'm like, holy crap. This kid's a millennial.
Right.
I'm like, I'm good at networking. Okay. I could probably pull this off. And
Right.
so that was just an idea to get my name out there. Hey, I can be your bodyguard. That was kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe I could get some business contracts. And so that was the whole focus of, hey, create a network, have people tell their story. And what the name came from was my dad outlook on his battle with brain cancer. He was fearless.
Mhm.
He didn't once complain about having brain cancer. He was a man of faith. He was actually a pastor. And so he had, that belief system that carried him to his last breath. So watching him in that journey, I was struggling with, what do I call this thing? And then I'm like, oh, I'm remembering my dad, the fearless mindset. So that's
I love that. Yeah.
where that came from. And it also correlates to the fearless mindset in business and life and being a protector in the exec protection industry or running a business. You got to be fearless running a business. If you have an ounce of fear in your brain, it ain't going to work.
Right. No, for those of you listening, you definitely check out. Like I said, we'll have the link to the Fearless Mindset podcast. It's got some great guests on there. I love the philosophy behind it. Obviously, sorry to hear about your father passing away, but he obviously approached it with great attitude, great
Hmm.
spirit, which I think is a testament to him. And then you're carrying on that same
The
spirit, that
legacy,
same legacy. Yeah.
right? Yeah, and for me, it's been I grew into this. For the first 15 episodes, if you watch it, I was like a nervous wreck. I'm like, poor Mike Trott, first one. I'm the guinea pig for Mark Ledlow here. I'm like, but he just, he was, the first guest that came on. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm giving it a shot. On a legal pad reading interview questions. I didn't know what I was doing. But he was gracious, as a mentor, helping me out. And then Frank Muir came on, and all of a sudden these Jack Carter just on. I'm like, whoa. I never
Yeah.
envisioned it to be what it is. And what I love about podcasting now is sharing someone's story, because that story can change someone's life, impact a person's decision making ability. Where I just heard Mike Howard say this on leadership, and I'm the CEO of a company. Maybe I need to call him to ask for advice, because I think we're in this world to help each other out to get through it.
I agree.
And yeah, I'm having a blast doing. I'm having more fun doing podcasting than standing post. I have to admit it. It's just it's a blast for me to connect with people, and then emotionally get together in person. And then you just never know where life will take you. Because I've had more business opportunities through podcasting. People say, "Are you have any sponsorship?" Like, no, not really. No, I'm not looking for that. If it comes, it comes. But I think in time it's a byproduct of serving your audience. Great. But for me, it's just putting somebody out there like Zach, for example. He interviewed with Pelican Hill Resort, left Balboa Bay Resort, and he did a podcast with me. And everybody said they listened to his podcast before the interview, and then he got the job.
Wow.
I'm like,
Yeah.
oh
See,
man, powerful.
that's it is powerful. Yeah. No, I'm like you. I'm enjoying doing this, and it's fun. And you've had some awesome guests like Carr and all these other folks. So yeah, that's good on you, and keep up the great work, because I love listening to it.
Oh, thanks, Mike. That means a lot coming from you. And man, I've really looked up to in the industry for many years. You didn't even know who it was, and I'm like, who is this guy, Mike Howard? He's interesting. You got to figure out what makes him tick. Yeah, you ran Microsoft. I mean, chief security officer of Microsoft and former CIA operator. I'm like, you are actually the Jack Ryan out there.
Yeah, yeah. Which I'm watching the series now on Amazon Prime. The last
Oh my
season's pretty
god, it's
good.
so good. Yeah, I was like, whoa. And
Yeah.
then you have like Rick Prado out there, and Trot, and all these big patriots that done some amazing things. See, I see a common thing with the CIA and the Navy SEAL thing going on out there. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very good. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your obviously very busy schedule to be on the podcast. There's some great nuggets that I know those of you listening are able to glean just from this conversation with Mark. Just especially those areas about mindset, about being able to step back, about how to deal with living in the moment, discipline, just it's really good. You are an entrepreneur, you're a veteran, you mentor people, but you have a very calm demeanor. And I like the way you approach life, being able to take when I'm walking, I don't have anything with me. I like that, because a lot of people don't. They're walking, but they're listening or they're looking at their phone doing business. That's not walking. That's business.
Exactly. And they don't have
Yeah.
the middle. The brain's got to check out, because you have to let those endorphins release. And part of stress, people with anxiety, they have stimulation 24/7.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what people don't realize is that thinking you're in your phone is creating more stress on you. And it's a
Yeah.
culture thing we have, and they feel like if the busier they are, the more productive they are, but not really.
No,
It,
no.
it's
You just it's a way to get to an easy grade, early grade, probably.
the stress alone. Yeah. But yeah, I've listened to, talked to some experts that, different pastors like Ben Corson. He was on my
Mhm.
show a year ago. and he tried to commit suicide twice.
Wow.
And he has severe depression, anxiety. He wrote 2 books. But the guy talks a mile a second. It's just like he's got so much energy. But what I learned from him was what is the anatomy takes place when you're walking and you're disconnected. The endorphins they're actually, he called it like natural medicine. When you're walking, the endorphins in your brain, when you have no stimulation coming in, you actually can process stress and information through your brain during that 1 hour workout you're doing. And that's better than medication from the doctor. I'm like, I never thought about it that way. But that's why he's playing that on the podcast. But I've been so blessed to have guys like yourself on the podcast. I'm getting ready to lock in General Mike Flynn here soon.
Nice.
So he'll be coming on probably in a couple of weeks. And it's a treat for me. I have a blast meeting all these folks and bringing them to the show, and the power of storytelling. You know, we all like watching Tom Cruise's movies and stuff, and watching him with all these creative, crazy stuff that he does, jumping off motorcycles off cliffs. But I'm really enjoying the art of storytelling, because it's an art form. You learn how to do it.
Yep. Amen to that. Well, I want to thank Mark again for being on our podcast, and much continued great success to you, your team, your family, and all. And so that's it for this edition of the Ronan Leadership Podcast. Again, we'll make sure we have links to Mark's podcast, so you can listen to it. And please, I encourage you to listen to it and to comment and to give him as much support as you can. Continue to like our channel here. Like I said earlier, we've got our books on MikeHowardAuthor.com. I'm writing now a sequel to Full Circle, and so that'll be coming out hopefully in the fall. So until next week, we'll do another edition of the Ronan Leadership Podcast. Stay safe and continue to practice great leadership.
Thanks, Mike.